Rimma Boshernitsan, the founder and CEO of Dialogue. Welcome to 10 by 20, a series of 10 questions discussed in 20-minute dialogues with local and international leaders doing visionary work at the intersection of people, technology, and society. Hello, everyone. I'm excited to introduce today's guest, Shruti Kothari. Shruti is a healthcare transformation advocate and leads industry initiatives for Blue Shield of California, focusing on industry alignment, collaboration, and mission-centered advocacy and policy movement. She's also the founder of Women of Community, which engages in advocacy efforts to increase representation of women of color in healthcare leadership. Welcome, Shruti.
Hi there. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you. So you know how I was sharing with you earlier how this 10 by 20 works. So we're going to do 10 questions in 20 minutes and with a quick rapid fire at the end.
Okay.
So I'm super curious. Yeah, I'm super curious to know more about you, and especially kind of what are some of the things in your childhood that, or people in your childhood that have influenced where you are today and your current work?
Yeah, I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a suburb of Milwaukee. What a lot of people don't know is Milwaukee, like NPR named Milwaukee the most racially segregated city in America. So it's a city that's pretty segregated, and growing up with immigrant parents, non-white, non-Christian, you're pretty different. And so I had early recognition of diversity, equity, and inclusion, I would say. And it's been kind of my North Compass ever since.
What was the most, do you remember like if there was one particular instance or multiple instances where you felt just a particular draw to kind of to the concept of maybe like belonging or just growing up in that environment? I can only imagine that the othering piece of it might have been very present.
Absolutely. I think when you grow up in that type of environment, you have first of all, you have sort of two reactions. You try to assimilate, or you're sort of like, you rebel and you're like, well, I'm going to be even more different sort of thing and prove you wrong. I was definitely the latter. And so I had been dreaming about moving to California since I was like young, basically. And I came to my parents and I was just like, I'm going to drop out of high school. Like a lot of people are not, they're successful without having gone to college, all these different things. And my parents, my poor immigrant parents, freaked out. They're like, what is she doing? And that's the reason we moved to California. We moved to California my senior year of high school. And then my dad passed away like a month after we moved to California. And so I always say it's like the last gift my dad gave me was bringing me to California. And my mom, so like to answer your question, my mom, a single mother, she never graduated college, and she was sort of like a non-professional degree, skilled labor, like hourly worker. And so I just saw her struggle too, to get employment, to work her way up and all that kind of stuff. And that to me was transformational, just seeing her experience. And that has driven me in my life. I come from a culture that is very oriented to a woman's worth is determined by who she can marry. And that's what financial mobility is. But I saw a really great example in front of me of how that's not always the best plan. And so what's really motivated me in life are diversity, equity, inclusion, but also kind of that making sure that you can really support yourself. There's for women, I think, financial independence is really important and all of those things. But anyways, so I love my mother so much, but she taught me a lot, and in how, the circumstances of her life taught me kind of how I wanted to lead my life in a different way, I would say.
Yeah, no, I was just reading an article about a woman that was writing about how women are, there was a question of how is it possible that men are raised to be violent towards women? Some men are and some men aren't. And where that kind of like the power dynamics are, so it's not even so much around like the physical power so much as it about the financial power, and how women automatically kind of assume these roles that are that put them in a disadvantage, whether they stay in their relationships or not, and maybe their loving marriage isn't absolutely fine. But it's just this interesting sort of moment of like everything that you do is becomes, even if it's for the marriage or for the family, it doesn't get valued as much as the other part of, you know, the husband's value, which can be tied to more financial success. Um, and so even if the woman has financial success, it's not necessarily the same as like the man's financial success, even if it's more than him. And sort of, and it's interesting how like what we allow in our society versus what we kind of hold, you know, not disallow, but really sort of what we make space for in a way that allows us to make the decisions that we do, and how do we actually like create the agency that we need, and the awareness that we need to be able to know that we have agency as women in
Yeah.
general. Super interesting, and probably goes back like centuries and centuries and centuries, right, of like how we've structured society
Yeah.
effectively. But yeah, I hear you on your relationship with your mom is amazing, and you've also learned kind of how not to be in a way. I have similar I feel relationship with my mother, in that I respect her so much for all that she's done. My parents and I and my brother immigrated here when I was 8 years old when I came in the early 90s. And so also, you know, to see the, you know, well, I could reflect on the struggle now. At the time, I had no idea what was really truly happening. And so I have tremendous respect for what they've been able to give me. But yet at the same time, I also see the expectations that they've had on both myself and my brother that are not even like, they're not even the things that you like, they never say it, but the implication is that, you know, you find yourself a good husband, it's great. It's great that you earn, but you know, the most important part is like that you have a good family. And so when I was like unsure if I was going to have kids, unsure if I even wanted to get married, my parents were very, I mean, they never said anything, but I could tell they were super uncomfortable with what is this that we raised? Who is this person that is in front of me? So completely hear you on all of that.
Yeah, that's
So
what I mean. It's like it's been an evolution for my mom and I have always been close, but that conversation that you're talking about is so real where they're right. That's how they were raised, and that's how they see the security of your future and want you to be happy. But that conversation of maybe that doesn't make me happy, right? Like that's an evolution of years. And like a great example is just like when I first graduated college, I remember all my cousins being like, so you're going to get married soon now, right? And I'm like, to who? Like, who am I getting married to? And, you know, my mom, she was really didn't want me to go to grad school. She was like, well, if you go to grad school, then you're going to have to find a boy who has education at that level and makes a certain amount of money and da, 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 da. And it's going to be harder. Like, and why would you quit a good, stable job where you have a salary that's good for that? And she went from that to today. She's like my biggest cheerleader in life. And she's like blasting all the family group chats with any, like, I'm sure this interview will end up in a family group chat, I promise. And so
cute. That's amazing. No, it's really great that she's your supporter because, you know, I have a number of girlfriends that are extremely successful, very educated, and date quite a bit, but have not been able to find a partner that is actually not intimidated with with who they have become. And it's just an interesting pattern that I'm seeing. And I'm like, what? And to your point, because the conditioning is such that like if it's unequal, and if it feels unequal, whether it's conscious or unconscious, people shy away from like an opportunity, right? So again, fascinating things that we can only change through behavior change that is going to take centuries to kind of, you know, become completely different. So I love that. I love hearing about your mother. And tell me, so I know that you're working at Blue Shield now. You've had this amazing career in healthcare. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the questions that you're most excited about answering in your work?
Yeah. So what I do at Blue Shield specifically is the innovations that we're testing in pilot form where we're ready to scale, when there is policy or industry misalignment, essentially, it's working on advocacy around moving those pieces so we can scale the innovation. So I mean, honestly, generally, I'm excited about that topic. My career has, you know, I went from like health educator to leading quality programs to working at a startup to venture and now this. And the reason why is because I saw at each one of those levels what was the next step to further advance innovation. And that's how I built built my career. And the latest, a lot of people would say, oh, you work in venture. That's like, it's such a kind of like, I feel like everyone wants to work in venture these days. But at the end of the day, when I would work with our companies, or even when I talked to our operational leaders at Kaiser Permanente, and when they were looking about, where was the ability to actually adopt innovation, to get it reimbursed, all these different things, it ended up being a lot of, it had to do with the policy around it or the industry around it, and if there was alignment. And so I just think Blue Shield, the fact that they have, I don't know any other healthcare organization that hasn't invested in a team like this. And the fact that they have not only invested in a team like this, but are actually, we have a pretty good operating budget to start coalitions, to bring industry collaborators together to move things. And so I'm really working, like, to give you a great, like, tangible example, the last 9 months we worked on, data, when we think about the concept of data sharing and how it's such a barrier, right, for patient care, for providers, lots of different things. So for 20 plus years in the state of California, people have tried to get legislation passed for data sharing, and it hasn't worked. And this past year, we were able to kind of launch a coalition focused on data sharing. And 9 months later of our advocacy campaign, AB 133 was passed, which includes elements of data sharing, which is very, very exciting. And we're going to keep working at it. But it's things like that to me are so exciting, because like the possibility now, and how do we do that? So pretty cool.
Yeah. I love that. I'm seeing like there's a pattern in some of the things that you've been saying around, like you just want to amplify things. You want to remove barriers and move things forward so that change actually happens.
Yeah.
What was the, like, how did you choose, a master's in public health? How did you decide that, venture or working at Kaiser Permanente or working at Blue Shield was the thing for you? Like, what was that like moment where, like, wow, health is for me?
So this, I just have to say, I think not enough people talk about this, which is, I had that kind of crisis that happens to, I think, almost every professional at some point in their career of like, what do I want to do with my life? I had, in undergrad, I had, worked at MTV, and I, studied communications, and I got a job in film PR, and I ended up hating it. And I was promoting Saw 3, nothing against Saw 3, but I just was like, what is my life? What has it become? And I quit, and I had to like figure out what I wanted to do. And I think, if you're not going into medicine, if you're not going into law, if you're not going into something with a very stable pathway, and even then I would question whether, at the ripe age of like 21, whether or not that's what you want to do for the rest of your life. Like, it's a very kind of anxiety situation where you're like, like everyone has a job. What am I going to do with my life? And so I did a lot of research, and I thought I wanted a PhD in sociology, and did a lot of stuff. And I really just landed on healthcare because I talked to, a shout out to one of my old professors in sociology at UCLA. I talked to her about my interests, and she was like, it really sounds like public health might be something that you should explore. And I this was back in like 2006. And so a while ago. Back then, public health was not a degree that you heard that often, I would say. Nowadays, I think it's different. But she was absolutely right, because I was interested in this kind of intersection of mission orientation, wanting to do good, wanting to help people, knowing that from my own experiences and just generally our healthcare system was pretty broken. And I wanted to support vulnerable populations, like with whatever work I did. And so it just felt like the best possible place to go to. And I ended up applying for grants for health education, and I got one. And then going into that, I saw working with county hospitals and seeing, children being interpreters for their parents, and just these different systematic things. That's why I went into quality, and in quality, after, doing really good work in quality, but seeing that there were some really low hanging fruits with innovation and technology, why I went to a startup. And then at a startup realizing, oh, really, you could have the best product, but if you can't get people to fund you, and the venture industry is pretty homogenous looking, and we know that there's a natural bias that people have. You trust people who look like you and have had experiences like you, right? So that means that if venture investors they're homogenous, let's just name it what it is, mainly white males with a sprinkling of white women, pretty much, then who are you funding? Who are those founders that you're funding? And then, of course, the data is when you look at founders who are funded, it's very similar. So anyways, I went into VC as a result of that. And then, and now I'm here in policy to make greater change.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And so like, and you're working in innovation, you're moving innovation along, you're removing barriers from innovation. But I'm curious also, when do you do your most innovative and creative work as an individual?
Yeah. When I'm angry, I know that is a weird answer, but like the most innovative work I have done is when I am really moved, but moved in a way where I'm outraged about something. And I am just like, well, I got to take this into my own hands and do something about it. Like, and whatever I can do about it. And that's when it's sort of like tunnel vision when something like that happens. And like inside of me, there's movement that I have to make. And, I started Women of Community because of that, of statistics I saw that I didn't agree with and I thought were terrible, and started a whole organization. So yeah.
No small feat, right? Just a little side hustle here and there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, so tell me more about Women of Community. I'm curious, kind of, what are some of the things, when did you start it, first of all, like around what time? And what are some of the things you've seen shift or change as a result of that work?
Yeah. So Women of Community, I started it during the pandemic. I started it basically the end of December last year. So it's not even a year old, the organization. I started it because, McKinsey does this annual report on women in healthcare, and their latest version came out, and it stated that only 30% white women in leadership power and 4% women of color in leadership power in healthcare. And so, the point of that was just basically like, while women are underrepresented, women of color are particularly underrepresented in leadership positions. And I just felt outraged because during this time was also the time that we were asking women of color, providers of color, to get their communities to turn out, to get vaccinations, to get masked up, and like to believe COVID is real and all these different things. It was coming off an election where we were calling on women of color to get their communities to come out, to mobilize, to vote. And so even just when you think of healthcare and you think of frontline staff, how many clinical and non-clinical frontline staff are women of color, how many caregivers, both paid and not paid, are women of color, and the outcome gaps that exist for women of color. The fact that only 4% are senior leaders is pretty egregious. So I started Women of Community, and at first it was really just to do like interview series like this and to elevate voices of leaders, but it's completely like morphed into something much larger, where we have monthly events, and we have skill-based events as well too, where we're supporting our community with different things like negotiation skills and, how do you tell your story on social media, things like that. We have partner with artists to do media advocacy campaigns. So a whole host of things. And our community has grown to over 3,500 across our platforms and our email distribution. Yeah. So it's very cool. And I've just seen so much love. And our team also, it started with just me, and now there's a team of 3 of us working on this who are super passionate about it. But I mean, really, I think everyone out there listening, if you're passionate about something, I thought when I saw that, oh, is anybody going to care about this organization I'm going to start? Who's going to actually engage? Like, it's whatever. But I've been amazed at how many people engage. And this is how every big movement always starts. It's always like, you think that it's very niche and it's like only you or a few other people will care about it, but likely not. And you should definitely, if you're out there listening and you have a passion for something, have the confidence that it's probably something other people can really relate to too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, kudos to you for starting something, right? I think that's the biggest, that's the inflection points, right? Those are the bigger things that you're actually going to make change around.
Yeah.
So are you ready for our rapid fire?
Yes, I am. Let's do it.
Okay. When do you feel most connected to others?
When I hear their story, that can be somebody completely different than me, but if I hear their story and their why, I feel connected to them.
Hmm. When and where are you happiest?
With my family, my mom is my best friend, and so at home with my family.
Hmm. What intersection of disciplines are you currently most fascinated by?
Oh, media and like healthcare advocacy, I think like TikTok is just amazing how people are using it for health education and the amount of like frontline providers that are on it
Mhm.
using it for good. It blows my mind and I think it's fascinating.
Hmm. What's your greatest regret?
I don't have regrets. I believe everything happens for a reason and we all are leading the lives we're meant to lead.
Awesome. I love that. What's the one thing you wish to pass on to the next generation?
Um, I would say kindness. I think, while there's a lot of amazing, efficient things in our world because of technology, I think it really does make people one dimensional sometimes. And you
Mhm.
forget that there's real humans on the other receiving end of your comments you're leaving on posts or, even when we think of Amazon and the drivers that are dropping off packages and,
Mhm.
all the, just that our world will really go to hell if we don't remember kindness. But yeah.
Totally. I love that. Well, thank you so much. And I know you wanted to mention something around staying up to date on women of community. I know I'd love to stay up to date. So tell us more.
Yes, yes, please follow us. We have a LinkedIn group and an Instagram, as well as an email distribution. It's at Women of Community on both LinkedIn and Instagram. And if you go to womenofcommunity.com, you can sign up for our email distribution.
Awesome. Well, thank you,
Yeah,
Shruti. This was awesome. It's great to
yeah.
talk to you.
Thank you. I appreciate this. This was super fun.
Thanks for tuning in to Dialogue's 10 by 20 interview series, where we ask 10 questions in 20 minutes to profile international leaders working at the intersection of people, technology, and society. That's all for today's episode. Like and subscribe below to get notified for our upcoming interviews. Follow us on Instagram at dialogue_co.